Hi, this is Phoenix, and I'm going to talk about a few things. I'm going to be talking about the complex relationship and juxtaposition of theory and practice, as described by thinkers such as William James and Guy Debord, various thinkers with various different agendas and yet essentially coming to the same conclusions on certain points, especially as relates to theory. I'm going to be talking about the difficulties of writing as well, and I'm going to be talking about the problems that I face with dealing with my mania um, and in general mental illness. And I'm going to unite all of these together, as you will see. So first we could start off with William James and his distinction between theory and practice, where he says that the difficulty with modern philosophy is that it has essentially divorced theory from practice. So theory has become kind of this disembodied idea, this disembodied thing that serves no function, that serves no purpose, that serves no teleology. And this essentially formed the basis of William James's pragmatism, his practical application of theory, his practical application of principles. Guy Debord comes to a similar conclusion when he basically says that theory is unrelated to practice, and this is because theory essentially has nothing to do with practice, and theory's become kind of a spectacle, so to speak. It's become kind of a phantom that haunts the world and that holds no practical bearing. So essentially he has kind of a conspiracy theory about theory and about the misapplication of theory by basically saying that it's politically problematic because theory serves no important function in society except to alienate, and that's because theory no longer has any relevance to what he would consider good choices or meaningful choices. And you can find this idea to be pretty compelling and most likely influenced by Marx. Now, I'm mentioning this because I suffer from two things. I suffer from the fact that I am a writer, and that is a joke, but at the same time it's not a joke. And I also suffer from mania or mental illness in general. Recently I was in the hospital, and the hospital helped keep my mania under control with the readjustment of medications. But sometimes, due to my temperament and due to the things that I think about, I essentially slide back into manic thoughts and impulses. And one of the things that has always stuck with me during the mania is this idea that I'm not good enough. It's this idea that I haven't done enough. It's this idea that I am dissatisfied with what I do and with everything that I try. And this isn't because I haven't done enough, empirically speaking. It's my own feeling from within that I haven't done enough. That comes from my impulsive and insatiable drive that comes from mania. But this is crucial because it ties to the difficulties of being a writer. And one of the difficult things about being a writer is you often are immersed in the realm of theory, and yet you're immersed in the realm of theory that seems to have no application to the real world. And that can be very, very frustrating. Now, I don't actually believe that the theory is divorced from the real world, as Debord would say, as James would say. I think that the theory is actually very applicable to the real world. But the problem is, the real world doesn't necessarily want to hear that theory because they don't think it's immediately applicable. So this would be like trying to apply aesthetics to a business or bureaucratic situation. That would just never happen because aesthetics, which is the study of art and the study of feeling as relates to art and the study of feelings in general, would have nothing to do with making hardcore and cold business decisions, as you can imagine. But that is exactly the difficulty, and that is exactly the frustration, because I think that you can apply theory. But the problem is people don't want to apply it, as I said, and this is because they have certain ideas in mind about what should be the case and what should actually exist. So for instance, I would say that society is very, very superficial with how they engage with ideas. This is sad when considering how deep our ideas can actually be, how fascinating our ideas can be, and how rich our ideas can be, and how they get siphoned off in day-to-day life because they're not considered practical. So this is problematic, of course, because um, as a writer, I see theory and I see uh, ways in which it could be applied, but it's hard because a lot of people don't want to apply it. So here's a good analogy. Say I'm at a bookstore and I'm trying to decide what book I'm going to get. Well, the way that the bookstore um, clerk would deal with the issue is they would just find the book that I need, but they wouldn't ask about the intellectual history of that book. They wouldn't ask what the book is about. They probably won't even make an offhand comment about what that book is, and that is because of our emphasis on bureaucracy and our emphasis on pragmatism and our lack of emphasis on theory. That's an analogy for the frustration that I, as a writer, have to deal with. Is there's a reason why I want that book, whether that book is a book by John Dos Passos, um, uh, or John Passos and his trilogy USA, um, because I'm curious about what his book has to do with society and what his book has to do with his critique of culture and what it has to do with his idea and critiques of modernity. And I want to be able to talk about those things. But the dilemma of the writer is that many people don't want to deal with those things, and so they instruct you to write them down, but then they don't even read those works. And so that can be very, very difficult. Now, to be clear, this isn't a rant about my failing as a writer, because I don't consider myself a failed writer, actually, in many ways, because my books are read, and because I get to write, and I feel like I've been successful in a lot of ways. But I have to admit there's a certain longing and nostalgia when I see, for instance, the winners of the Nobel Prize of this year of 2016 for physics, for topology, which is an obscure but important branch in mathematics that they tie into physics, and that they basically theorized with topology could create superfluids and the like, which could really do a lot of groundbreaking things for technology. And it makes me feel sad because I see how successful they are, and I see the practice and praxis and pragmatism of their theoretical work, and that frustrates me so much because I'm like, why are my ideas, which are philosophical, sociological, psychological, autobiographical, and anecdotal, not applied in the same ways that I often see other things applied, such as theoretical physics and mathematics, but also things such as literature and the way in which many literary ideas do influence the world. Um, so as you can imagine, that would be really, really frustrating. And this is why I opened up with the idea of the split between theory and practice, because it seems that practice is often separate from theory. You could go to the ancient, so to speak, idea of existentialism, which is the split between reason and life. But I think all of that is really a distraction from what actually exists and what is actually there, and what is actually possible. This is why I mention my idea of infinite potentiality a lot, because I can see the possibilities. I'm just not sure how to apply them. But I think part of the reason, as I'm going to make clear, is the fact that we simply live in a society that isn't tolerant to theory, that isn't tolerant to the theoretical, and that makes it very difficult. And so, by virtue of the fact that these theories exist, that isn't good enough, and society has its notions built on what is practical, even if what's practical is not necessarily better. And so what this leads someone like a writer to do is essentially cancel their ideas, or not find a practical application for their ideas because it's unaccepted. And essentially what this leaves is a confused writer who has no way of channeling their ideas into the world, and their theories become divorced from the world more and more because there's no avenue, there's no venue, there's no place for their ideas to flourish. And I would say that this is my general frustration as a writer. This is my general frustration with writing. And some of this also comes from a mania where I constantly feel like my ideas are just thoughts. My thoughts are just thoughts, and they have nothing to do with the real world. And so that makes me even more fragmented and alienated from society. And so it's interesting how writing is related to mental illness, how writing is related to mania. But that's true as well. So this is my thought on theory versus practice. I hope you find it interesting, and I hope that you find it worthwhile. This is Phoenix, and thank you.